Hold on, I'm just getting my chair set up. Great. Chair is set up. About to pull down the image. Okay. I am right here. Hold on a second. Hey, everybody. I'm here in my office, which is a little bit messy, but you know what? You got to deal with it. We got questions. Where are you at? Hey, Shane. Thank you for having a question. I am going to answer all of your questions. Also, I'm going to talk about how to fact check the news story. For those of you who don't know what I do, or at least previously did, because now I'm just mostly working on my own projects, but I used to also work for news sources all the time, and I would write things for them. And so I also worked for documentaries, news sources and documentaries, and so I have to learn how to fact check things. And with everything that's flying around on the internet, I thought it might be a good idea to just show people some fact-checking techniques so that you don't read a headline and then just fly off the handle, because there's all kinds of ways for that to happen. Oh, gotta turn the sound on. Haha, of course. Hi. Hey, Shane. All right, so let's talk about fact-checking really quick. I'll just tell you what I did. Is the music too loud? Let me know if the music is too loud. If the music is not too loud, I'm going to drop it a little bit just to be sure. There we go. Also, did I just end everything? Here we go. Great. Let's answer this question really quick and we'll get into fact checking. Question from Julia. What kind of song are you playing? That's kind of jazzy music. All right. Okay, so let's talk about fact checking. So now the reason that fact checking is important is because that news sources out there, and a lot of them are misleading, and a lot of people distrust the news in general. Not in the idea where, like, you know, Trump is like saying everything's fake news that doesn't agree with me. That's dumb. But in general, news sources, even news sources that you trust, sometimes are wrong, especially with breaking news, because when breaking news happens, something interesting happens. What happens is that, number one, people want to be the first to break the news. And they can't always be the first to break the news. But when people want to be the first to break the news, they're always like checking sources and trying to see if they've got enough legitimate sources online so that they can be the first to break the news. But while they're doing that, obviously there's sort of like competition between news sources to be the first to put something out. So if they get a legitimate source, the amount of vetting of that source is sometimes less because they want to be the first to put out that, you know, whatever it is. Anyway, so it's not always on purpose. Sometimes the news sources themselves can be misled. I think there are far fewer sources out there trying to mislead you on purpose. But I mean, there are some. But in any case, here's how to fact check news. Unfortunately, it's easier to fact check older news stories than it is to fact check newer news stories. Newer news stories, as they're breaking it really hard. But there are some things you can do to at least make it seem more reliable. Number one, obviously you can consider the source. If a news source is a well-known news source, that's always something. A lot of people are sending around news articles and it'll be, you know, Uncle James News, and that news source isn't reliable. If it's a news source that you've heard of, then there's a higher probability that it's reliable. But again, those news sources themselves can be misled. So there are other ways to check. Also, if more than one news source that is reliable is reporting it, that's also a way to check and see if something is more reliable. One thing that you have to watch out for is that sometimes multiple news sources may be reporting, but they will be working from the same source. And if multiple news sources are working from the same source, it's really more about whether or not that original source is reliable, or than whether or not the actual news article that you're reading is reliable. So check the source. Okay. Number 2, read. I know this sucks, but read past the headline. Like, for instance, there's a headline going around that where they're showing all of the pictures of the protests and the crowds, the throngs of crowds, but then right after that, the headline says 20,000 new cases of COVID. And of course, it takes longer than 2 days or 8 days or however many days the protests have been going on. I think it's like almost 8. It takes longer than 8 days for most symptoms to come up. And then, of course, most of the people who went to the protests have not been tested yet. So if you read those articles, often it'll say that the new COVID cases are more likely from the gradual reopening of America than they are from the protests themselves. And those cases are probably going to be showing up in like a week to 2 weeks. So read. So people will write sensational headlines. They want you to read their paper. So read the actual articles. Often the real information is dispensed in the actual article. Another way, check the author. Okay, if you get an article and you don't know the source, and one thing you can do is Google the author. The authors, and especially if they're like online and they're verified, it's a good idea to check the author and see what else they've written and whether or not those stories are true. Because as I said before, the older a story is, the easier it is to check whether or not the fact is true, because there's been more research on it. So you can see if that author has a consistent track record of putting out credible stories. So if there's a breaking news and the author is consistently putting out credible stories, then you can be like, oh, okay, this is high probability of being true. That's something that I always do. Like, especially if something gives me an emotional reaction, they're like, a cop threw a baby in the air and didn't catch it. And then I'm like, oh my God. So then I check the sources to make sure this is true before I get too mad about it, because I don't want to get too mad about it. Let's see, there's another question. Here we go. Question from me. My parents and I are disagreeing with the events leading up to Trump's Bible photo. Do you know the facts? From what I've seen, they started spraying peaceful protesters. My parents say looters damaged the nursery there. I'm trying to look it up while I ask. That's actually something that I've been researching. I'm actually not sure about the nursery that you're talking about, but I do know that, I mean, and actually there's articles coming out today that like Esper, he says that he is against the military force on crowds, but and also who was it that just resigned from the Pentagon because they said that, you know, the photo op that Trump did was terrible. About that whole photo op thing, like clergy are coming out after Trump because of it. Like clergy are on the news saying, "What the fuck, Trump?" So I think that the whole thing with Trump and the photo op and the Bible is pretty much a negative on his end. I mean, if the church is coming out after you, come on, that dude is terrible. All right. Here's another one. I guess you should determine if multiple sources support the same story. This is a good one, especially when there's breaking news. Like multiple sources or multiple news sources will obviously be putting their own take on things. And so the more you can see a story reported, the more you know that it's probable. And if something is especially inflammatory, there are sources out there which all they do solely is try and check on whether or not the story is true. And I would think that you should be aware that there are several news sources that have bias. Let me show you this chart that I dug up for you. Actually, let me get this in here, and boom, here comes a chart, everybody. Now, this chart was actually made in 2014. That's another thing you should do is check the dates. A lot of times people will send out old articles to inflame people currently, like older articles that fit their story, whatever story they're trying to tell. They'll send out older articles which support that, and then they will and people will often read those articles and not check the actual dates of those articles. Check the dates on the articles or when something happened, and if an article is especially inflammatory, Google it and see if there's other reporting. If the other reporting has the same dates as the dates that are, or if the other reporting has the same dates or older dates, you can find out whether or not an article is like actual news or just recycled. So this was put up by Business Insider in 2014, where they just basically they went through every news source and then showed what bias they normally have. Fox News isn't even on here. It's probably like way off here somewhere because it's, but basically remember that every news source has a bias. It's impossible for them not to have any bias because they're written by people. People have biases. So check those biases. Remember that the news source that you are reading may have some sort of bias. Now, I am going to show you some of my favorite news sources right now for breaking news. Let's see, we have another question. Who do you think Biden should pick for VP? Barack Obama. I hope. No, I don't know. I mean, Biden. I actually just posted this on Twitter just like a little bit ago, that both of the presidential candidates are older white guys who sound like they're drunk when they talk. It was Miller. What was Miller? Just because of the delay, it's hard for me to see what you were referring to, Julie. Oh, wait, are you referring to the guy from the Pentagon who resigned? Okay. Here's some of my favorite sites to look at. All Sides, okay? What they do, it's allsides.com. And what they do is they just show you stories and show you how it's being reported from the left, from the right, and from the center. If I were you, I would put this in your like news tab and mark it and bookmark it so that you can keep it. It's actually a great site where you can just see just how people are reporting on the exact same story, and including. I mean, just everything. I mean, it's a great site, and I'm glad that some people have gone out and tried to create these sites that really look over things. All Sides is a great site to look at news from. I have it up here twice. It's so good. Factcheck.org is a great one. It's a site where all they do is just fact check things, and they fact check things that are blowing up in the news. So anytime something is blowing up, and they fact check on both sides too. So like they're examining Biden and they're also examining Trump. And so like they're a great site. Add them to your news feed, factcheck.org. They're awesome. Here's a great one. Oh, I have it up twice too. What am I doing, guys? I don't know. PolitiFact is great. They also do the same thing. They check facts as much as they possibly can. Ladies and gentlemen, Leslie is giving me a beverage to drink while I'm doing this because she loves me. Yay! Hats off to Leslie. You guys, this is straight vodka and pineapple. I'm kidding. It's just it's not. It's just like sparkling water with juice. It's one of our favorite drinks in the house, to mix sparkling water with juice. It's delicious, but I wish it was vodka. Because, she should be drunk 24/7. Anyway, here's PolitiFact. It basically, you can look down here where it takes like things that are going around the internet and then shows you whether or not they're false. And Pants on Fire is really, really false, apparently. So, it doesn't have anything that is 100% true. But things that are inflammatory, they look at it and they check the facts. Snopes is also a good one. Yep, this is Snopes. Snopes is also a good one. They do kind of the same thing as PolitiFact. I kind of like PolitiFact more because it's easier to know at a glance. Snopes does kind of a clickbaity thing where you have to click on the article, and then you have to read the article, and so it'll tell you at the end whether or not it's true or false. But PolitiFact gives you like just a bird's eye view of the whole thing. Anyway, I hope that some of this is useful. Check your facts as much as you can. If you see something even from a source that you trust, like say you see something from CNN and you watch CNN all the time, before you copy and paste that link and send it out to all your friends and say the sky is falling, please just double check. And let's be clear, Chicken Little was right. The sky is falling right now. But I'm also saying, please also remember to check your sources. You guys, that's everything I wanted to talk about today. Unless there are any questions, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm so sad that the world is on fire. I wish there were like more that anybody could do. I mean, there is more that people can do. I'm just trying to do what I can do, which is I'm trying to share information. So hopefully, some of this information does not fall on deaf ears. I used to work for a news source. I won't tell you who because of what I'm going to say about this news source, but where the producers were not even up on their just regular like civil studies. Like one of the producers asked me if I was sure that Washington, D.C. was not a state. And I was just like, what? You report the news? And they did. So just check, because it's good to check. It's good to have a sense of inquisitiveness about everything, because people are sending around crazy stuff. Just be sure before you send it to somebody else. All right, I am done for today. Good luck, everybody. Bye-bye.